Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Prabhupāda. Chapter 46. Delivery of the Message of Krishna to the Gopis. When the Gopis saw Uddhava, they observed that his features almost exactly resembled the features of Krishna, and they could understand that he was a great devotee of Krishna's. His hands were very long, and his eyes were just like the petals of the lotus flower. He was dressed in yellow-colored garments and wore a garland of lotus flowers. His face was very beautiful. Having achieved the liberation of Sarupya and having the same bodily features as the Lord, Uddhava looked almost like Krishna. In Krishna's absence, the Gopis had been coming dutifully to visit Mother Yashoda's house early in the morning. They knew that Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda were always grief-stricken, and they had made it their first duty to come and pay their respects to the most exalted elderly personalities of Vrindavan. Seeing the friends of Krishna, Nanda and Yashoda would remember Krishna himself and be satisfied, and the Gopis also would be pleased by seeing Nanda and Yashoda. When the Gopis saw that Uddhava was representing Krishna even in his bodily features, they thought that he must be a soul completely surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They began to contemplate, who is this boy who looks just like Krishna? He has the same eyes like lotus petals, the same raised nose and beautiful face, and he is smiling in the same way. In all respects, he is resembling Krishna, Shyamasundar, the beautiful dark boy. He is even dressed exactly like Krishna. Where has this boy come from? Who is the fortunate girl who has him for her husband? Thus they all talked among themselves. They were very anxious to know about him, and because they were simply unsophisticated village girls, they surrounded Uddhava. When the Gopis understood that Uddhava had a message from Krishna, they became very happy and called him to a secluded place to sit down. They wanted to talk with him very freely and did not want to be embarrassed before unknown persons. They began to welcome him with polite words and great submissiveness. "We know that you are a most confidential associate of Krishna, and that he has therefore sent you to Vrindavan to give solace to his father and mother. We can understand that family affection is very strong. Even great sages who have taken to the renounced order of life cannot give up family members. Krishna has therefore sent you to his father and mother. Otherwise, he has no further business in Vrindavan. He is now in town. What does he have to know about Vrindavan village or the cows' pasturing grounds? These things are not at all useful for Krishna because he is now a man in the city. Surely he has nothing to do with persons who do not happen to be his family members. Why should one bother about those who are outside the family, especially and specifically those who are attached as the wives of others? Krishna is interested in them as long as there is a need of gratification, like the bumblebees who have interest in the flowers as long as they want to take the honey out of them. It is very natural and psychological that a prostitute does not care for her paramour as soon as he loses his money. Similarly, when the citizens find that a government is incapable of giving them full protection, they leave the country. A student, after finishing his education, gives up his relationship with the teacher and the school. A rich man, after taking his reward from his worshipper, gives him up. When the fruit season is over, the birds are no longer interested in the tree. Just after eating in the house of a lord, the guest gives up his relationship with the host. After a forest fire, when there is a scarcity of green grass, the deer and other animals give up the forest. And so a man, after enjoying his girlfriend, gives up his connection with her. In this way, all the Gopis began to indirectly accuse Krishna by citing so many similes. Uddhava understood that the Gopis of Vrindavan were all simply absorbed in the thought of Krishna and his childhood activities. While talking about Krishna with Uddhava, they forgot all about their household business. They even forgot about themselves as their interest in Krishna increased more and more. One of the Gopis, namely Srimati Radharani, was so much absorbed in thoughts of Krishna by dint of her personal touch with him that she actually began to talk with a bumblebee, which was flying there and trying to touch her lotus feet. While another Gopi was talking with Krishna's messenger Uddhava, Srimati Radharani took that bumblebee to be a messenger from Krishna and began to talk with it as follows. "Bumblebee, You are accustomed to drinking honey from the flowers, and therefore you have preferred to be a messenger of Krishna, who is of the same nature as you. I have seen on your mustaches the red powder of kumkum, which was smeared on the flower garland of Krishna while he was pressing the breast of some other girl, who is my competitor. You are feeling very proud by touching that flower, and your mustaches have become reddish. You have come here carrying a message for me. You are anxious to touch my feet. But, my dear bumblebee, let me warn you, don't touch me. I don't want any messages from your unreliable master. You are the unreliable servant of an unreliable master. It may be that Srimati Radharani purposely addressed that bumblebee sarcastically in order to criticize the messenger Uddhava. Indirectly, Srimati Radharani saw Uddhava as not only resembling Krishna's bodily features, but as being equal to Krishna. In this way, she indicated that Uddhava was as unreliable as Krishna himself. Srimati Radharani wanted to give specific reasons why she was dissatisfied with Krishna and his messengers. She addressed the bumblebee. Your master Krishna is exactly of your quality. You sit down on a flower, and after taking a little honey, you immediately fly away and sit in another flower and taste. You're just like your master Krishna. He gave us the chance of tasting the touch of his lips and then left altogether. I know also that the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, who is always in the midst of the lotus flower, is constantly engaged in Krishna's service. But I do not know why she has become so captivated by Krishna. She is attached to him, although she knows his actual character. As far as we are concerned, we are more intelligent than that goddess of fortune. We are not going to be cheated any more by Krishna or his messengers. According to expert opinion, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, is a subordinate expansion of Srimati Radharani. As Krishna has numerous expansions of Vishnumurtis, so his pleasure potency Radharani also has innumerable expansions of goddesses of fortune. Therefore, the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi-ji, is always anxious to be elevated to the position of the Gopis. Srimati Radharani continued, You foolish bumblebee, you are trying to satisfy me and get a reward by singing the glories of Krishna. But it is a useless attempt. We are bereft of all our possessions. We are away from our homes and families. We know very well about Krishna. We know even more than you. So whatever you make up about him will be old stories to us. Krishna is now in the city and is better known as the friend of Arjuna. He now has many new girlfriends, and they are no doubt very happy in association with him. Because the lusty burning sensation of their breasts has been satisfied by Krishna, they are now happy. If you go there and glorify Krishna, they may be pleased to reward you. You are just trying to pacify me by your behavior as a flatterer, and therefore you have put your head under my feet. But I know the trick which you are trying to play. I know that you are a messenger coming from a great trickster, Krishna. Therefore, please leave me. I can understand that you are very expert in reuniting two opposing parties, but at the same time you must know that I cannot place my reliance upon you, nor upon your master, Krishna. We left our families, husbands, children, and relatives only for Krishna, and yet he did not feel any obligation in exchange. He has left us for lost. Do you think we can place our faith in him again? We know that Krishna cannot be long without the association of young women. That is his nature. He is finding difficulty in Mathura because he is no longer in the village among innocent cowherd girls. He is in the aristocratic society and must be feeling difficulty in making friendships with the young girls. Perhaps you have come here to canvass again or to take us there. But why should Krishna expect us to return there? He is greatly qualified to entice all other girls, not only in Vrindavan or Mathura, but all over the universe. His wonderfully enchanting smile is so attractive and the movement of his eyebrows so beautiful that he can call for any woman from the heavenly, middle, or plutonic planets. Mahalakshmi, the greatest of all goddesses of fortune, also hankers to render him some service. In comparison to all those women of the universe, what are we? We are very insignificant. Krishna advertises himself as very magnanimous, and he is praised by great saints. His qualifications could be perfectly utilized if he would only show us mercy because we are downtrodden and neglected by him. You poor messenger, you are only a less intelligent servant. You do not know much about Krishna, how ungrateful and hard-hearted he has been, not only in this life, but in his previous lives also. We have all heard this from our grandmother, Purnamasi. She has informed us that Krishna was born in a Kshatriya family previous to this birth and was known as Ramachandra. In that birth, instead of killing Vali, an enemy of his friend, in the manner of a Kshatriya, he killed him just like a hunter. A hunter takes a secure hiding place and then kills an animal without facing it. So Lord Ramachandra, as a Kshatriya, should have fought with Vali face to face, but instigated by his friend, he killed him from behind a tree. Thus he deviated from the religious principles of a Kshatriya. Also, he was so attracted by the beauty of Sita that he converted Surpanaka, the sister of Ravana, into an ugly woman by cutting off her nose and ears. Surpanaka proposed an intimate relationship with him, and as a Kshatriya, he should have satisfied her. But he was so selfish that he could not forget Sita Devi and converted Surpanaka into an ugly woman. Before that birth as a Kshatriya, he took his birth as a Brahmin boy known as Vamanadev and asked charity from Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj was so magnanimous that he gave him whatever he had, yet Krishna as Vamanadev ungratefully arrested him, just like a crow, and pushed him down to the Patala kingdom. We know all about Krishna and how ungrateful he is. But here is the difficulty. In spite of his being so cruel and hard-hearted, it is very difficult for us to give up talking about him. Not only are we unable to give up this talk, but great sages and saintly persons are also engaged in talking about him. We Gopis of Vrindavan do not want to make any friendships with this blackish boy, but we do not know how we shall be able to give up remembering and talking about his activities. Since Krishna is absolute, his so-called unkind activities are as relishable as his kind activities. Saintly persons and great devotees like the Gopis cannot give up Krishna in any circumstances. Lord Chaitanya therefore prayed, Krishna, you are free and independent in all respects. You can either embrace me or crush me under your feet, whatever you like. You may make me broken-hearted by not letting me see you throughout my whole life, but you are my only object of love. In my opinion, Srimati Radharani continued, one should not hear about Krishna, because as soon as a drop of the nectar of his transcendental activities is poured into the ear, one immediately rises above the platform of duality, attraction, and rejection. Being completely freed from the attraction of material attachment, one gives up the attachment for this material world, family, home, wife, children, and everything which is materially dear to every person. Being dispossessed of all material acquisition, one makes his relatives and himself unhappy. Then he wanders in search of Krishna, either as a human being or in other species of life, even as a bird. It is very difficult to actually understand Krishna, his name, his quality, his form, his pastimes, his paraphernalia, and his entourage. Srimati Radharani continued to speak to the black messenger of Krishna. Please do not talk any more about Krishna. It is better to talk about something else. We are already doomed, like the black-spotted she-deer in the forest, who are enchanted by the sweet musical vibration of the hunter. In the same way, we have been enchanted by the sweet words of Krishna, and again we are thinking of the rays of the nails of his toes. We are becoming more and more lustful for his association. Therefore, I request you not to talk of Krishna anymore. This talk of Radharani with the bumblebee messenger and her accusing Krishna, and at the same time her inability to give up talking about him, are symptoms of the topmost transcendental ecstasy called Mahabhav. The ecstatic Mahabhav manifestation is possible only in the persons of Radharani and her associates. Great acharyas like Śrīla Rupa Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have analyzed these Mahabhav speeches of Srimati Radharani, and they have described the different sentiments such as udgarna, bewilderment, and jalpa pratijalpa, talking in different ways. In Radharani is found the science of Ujjvala, or the brightest jewel or love of God. While Radharani was talking with the bee and the bee was flying hither and thither, it all of a sudden disappeared from her sight. She was in full mourning due to separation from Krishna and was feeling ecstasy by talking with the bee. But as soon as the bee disappeared, she became almost mad, thinking that the messenger bee might have returned to Krishna to inform him all about her talking against him. Krishna must have been very sorry to hear it, she thought. In this way, she was very much overwhelmed with another type of ecstasy. In the meantime, the bee, flying hither and thither, appeared before her again. She thought, Krishna is still kind to me. In spite of the messenger carrying disruptive messages, he is so kind that he has again sent the bee to take me to him. Srimati Radharani was very careful this time not to say anything against Krishna. My dear friend, I welcome you, she said. Krishna is so kind that he has again sent you. Krishna is so kind and affectionate to me that he has sent you back, fortunately, in spite of your carrying my message against him. My dear friend, you can ask from me whatever you want. I shall give you anything because you are so kind upon me. You have come to take me to Krishna because he is not able to come here. He is surrounded by new girlfriends in Mathura. But you are a tiny creature. How can you take me there? How will you be able to help me in meeting Krishna while he is taking rest there along with the goddess of fortune and embracing her to his chest? Never mind. Let us forget all these things about my going there or sending you. Please let me know how Krishna is faring in Mathura. Tell me if he still remembers his foster father Nanda Maharaj, his affectionate mother Yashoda, his cowherd friends, and his poor friends like us, the Gopis. I am sure that he must sometimes sing about us. We served him just like maidservants without any payment. Is there any possibility that Krishna will again come back and place his arms around us? His limbs are always fragrant with the agaru scent. Please put all these inquiries to Krishna. Uddhava was standing near, and he heard Radharani talking in this way, as if she had become almost mad after Krishna. He was exceedingly surprised at how the gopis were accustomed to think of Krishna constantly in that topmost ecstasy of Mahabhav love. He had brought a message in writing from Krishna, and now he wanted to present it before the gopis, just to pacify them. He said, My dear gopis, your mission of human life is now successful. You are all wonderful devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you are eligible to be worshipped by all kinds of people. You are worshipable throughout the three worlds because your minds are wonderfully absorbed in the thought of Vyāsadeva, Krishna. He is the goal of all kinds of pious activities and ritualistic performances, such as giving in charity, rigidly following the austerity of vows, undergoing severe penances, and igniting the fire of sacrifice. He is the purpose behind the chanting of different mantras, the reading of the Vedas, controlling the senses, and concentrating the mind in meditation. These are some of the many different processes for self-realization and attainment of perfection in life. But actually, they are only meant for realizing Krishna and dovetailing oneself in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita also. Although there are descriptions of different kinds of processes of self-realization, at the end, Krishna recommended one should give up everything and simply surrender unto him. All other processes are meant for teaching one how to surrender ultimately unto the lotus feet of Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita also says that this surrendering process is completed by a sincere person, executing the processes of self-realization in wisdom and austerity after many births. Since the perfection of such austerity was completely manifested in the life of the gopis, Uddhava was fully satisfied upon seeing their transcendental position. He continued to say, My dear gopis, the mentality which you have developed in relationship with Krishna is very, very difficult to attain, even for great sages and saintly persons. You have attained the highest perfectional stage of life. It is a great boon for you that you have fixed your mind upon Krishna and have decided to have Krishna only, giving up your family, home, relatives, husbands, and children for the sake of the Supreme Personality. Because your mind is now fully absorbed in Krishna, the Supreme Soul, universal love has automatically developed in you. I think myself very fortunate that I have been favored by your grace to see you in this situation. When Uddhava said that he had a message from Krishna, The Gopis were more interested in hearing the message than in hearing about their exalted position. They did not very much like being praised for their high position. They showed their anxiety to hear the message which Uddhava had brought from Krishna. Uddhava said, "My dear Gopis, I am especially deputed to carry this message to you, who are such great and gentle devotees. Krishna has specifically sent me to you because I am his most confidential servitor." The written message which Uddhava brought from Krishna was not delivered to the Gopis by Uddhava, but he personally read it before them. The message was very gravely written, so that not only the Gopis, but all empiric philosophers might understand how pure love of God is intrinsically integrated with all the different energies of the Supreme Lord. From Vedic information, it is understood that the Supreme Lord has multi-energies, parasya shaktir vividhaiva shruyate. Also, the Gopis were such intimate personal friends of Krishna that while he was writing the message for them, he was much moved and could not write distinctly. Uddhava, as the student of Brihaspati, had very sharp intelligence, so instead of handing over the written message, he thought it wise to read it personally and explain it to them. Uddhava continued, "These are the words from the personality of Godhead. My dear Gopis, my dear friends, please know that separation between ourselves is impossible at any time, at any place, or under any circumstances, because I am all-pervading. This all-pervasiveness of Krishna is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, both in the 9th and 7th chapters. Krishna is all-pervasive in his impersonal feature. Everything is resting in him, but he is not personally present everywhere. In the 7th canto also, it is stated that the 5 gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, and sky, and the 3 subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ego, are all his inferior energies. But there is another, superior energy, which is called the living entity. The living entities are also directly part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, Krishna is the source of both the material and spiritual energies. He is always intermingled with everything as cause and effect. Not only the Gopis, but all living entities are always inseparably connected with Krishna in all circumstances. The Gopis, however, are perfectly and thoroughly in cooperation in their relationship with Krishna, whereas the living entities under the spell of Maya are forgetful of Krishna. They think themselves as separate identities having no connection with Krishna. Love of Krishna or Krishna consciousness is therefore the perfectional stage of real knowledge in understanding things as they are. Our minds can never be vacant. The mind is constantly occupied with some kind of thought, and the subject matter of such thought cannot be outside the 8 elements of Krishna's energy. One who knows this philosophical aspect of all thoughts is actually a wise man, and he surrenders unto Krishna. The Gopis are the typical example of this perfectional stage of knowledge. They are not simple mental speculators. Their minds are always in Krishna. The mind is nothing but the energy of Krishna. Actually, any person who can think, feel, act, and will cannot be separated from Krishna. But the stage in which he can understand his eternal relationship is called Krishna consciousness. The diseased condition in which he cannot understand his eternal relationship with Krishna is the contaminated stage, or Maya. Since the Gopis are on the platform of pure transcendental knowledge, their minds are always filled with Krishna consciousness. For example, as there is no separation between fire and air, so there is no separation between Krishna and the living entities. When the living entities forget Krishna, they are not in their normal condition. As for the Gopis, because they are always thinking of Krishna, they are on the absolute stage of perfection in knowledge. The so-called empiric philosophers sometimes think that the path of bhakti is meant for the less intelligent. But unless the so-called man of knowledge comes to the platform of bhakti, his knowledge is certainly impure and imperfect. Actually, the stage of perfecting one's eternal relationship with Krishna is love and separation. But that is also illusory because there is no separation. The Gopis were never separated from Krishna. Even from the philosophical point of view, there was no separation. The cosmic manifestation is also not separated from Krishna. Nothing is separate from me. The whole cosmic manifestation is resting on me and is not separate from me. Before the creation, I was existing. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature. Before creation, there was only Narayan. There were no Brahma and no Shiva as assistants. The whole cosmic manifestation is manipulated by the three modes of material nature. Brahma is the incarnation of the quality of passion. It is said that Brahma created this universe, but Brahma is the secondary creator. The original creator is Narayan. This is also confirmed by Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Narayana Paro Vyaktat. Narayan is transcendental, beyond this cosmic creation. Krishna creates, maintains, and annihilates the whole cosmic manifestation by expanding himself in different incarnations. Everything is Krishna, and everything is depending on Krishna, but he is not perceived in the material energy. Material energy is called Maya, or illusion. In the spiritual energy, however, Krishna is perceived at every step, in all circumstances. This perfectional stage of understanding is present in the Gopis. As Krishna is always aloof from the cosmic manifestation, although it is completely dependent on him, so a living entity is also completely aloof from his material conditional life. The material body has developed on the basis of spiritual existence. In the Bhagavad Gita, the whole cosmic manifestation is accepted as the mother of the living entities, and Krishna is the father. As the father impregnates the mother by injecting the living entity within the womb, so all the living entities are injected by Krishna in the womb of the material nature. They come out in different bodies according to their different fruitive activities. In all circumstances, the living entity is aloof from this material conditioned life. If we simply study our own bodies, we can understand how a living entity is always aloof from this bodily engagement. Every action of the body is taking place by the interaction of the three modes of material nature. We can see at every moment many changes taking place in bodies, but the spirit soul is aloof from all changes. One can neither create nor annihilate nor interfere with the actions of material nature. The living entity is therefore entrapped by the material body and is conditioned in three stages, namely while awake, asleep, and unconscious. The mind is acting through all the three conditions of life. The living entity in his sleeping or dreaming condition sees something as real, and in his awake condition he sees the same thing as unreal. It is concluded, therefore, that under certain circumstances he accepts something as real, and under other circumstances he accepts the very same thing as unreal. These matters are the subject matter of study for the empiric philosopher or the Sankhya yogi. In order to come to the right conclusion, Sankhya yogis undergo severe austerities and penances. They practice control of the senses and renunciation. All these different ways of determining the ultimate goal of life are compared to rivers. Krishna is the ocean. As the rivers flow down toward the ocean, all attempts for knowledge flow toward Krishna. After many, many births of endeavor, when one actually comes to Krishna, he attains the perfectional stage. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, "All are pursuing the path of realizing me, but those who have adopted courses without any bhakti find their endeavor very troublesome." Klesho dika taraste sham. Krishna cannot be understood unless one comes to the point of bhakti. Three paths are enunciated in the Gita: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Those who are too addicted to fruitive activities are advised to perform actions which will bring them to bhakti. Those who are addicted to the frustration of empiric philosophy are also advised to realize bhakti. Karma Yoga is different from ordinary karma, and Jnana Yoga is different from Jnana. Ultimately, as stated by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti-mam abhijanati. Only through execution of devotional service can one understand Krishna. The perfectional stage of devotional service was achieved by the Gopis because they did not care to know anything but Krishna. It is confirmed in the Vedas, Yasmin eva vigate sarvam eva vigatam bhavanti. This means that simply by knowing Krishna, all other knowledge is automatically acquired. Krishna continued, "Transcendental knowledge of the Absolute is no longer necessary for you. You were accustomed to love me from the very beginning of your lives. Knowledge of the Absolute Truth is specifically required for persons who want liberation from material existence. But one who has attained love for Krishna is already on the platform of liberation. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone engaged in unalloyed devotional service is to be considered situated on the transcendental platform of liberation. The gopis were not actually feeling any pangs of material existence, but they were feeling the separation of Krishna. Krishna therefore said, "My dear gopis, in order to increase your super excellent love for me, I have purposely separated myself from you. I have done this so that you may be in constant meditation on me." The gopis are in the perfectional stage of meditation. The yogis are generally more fond of meditation than the execution of devotional service to the Lord. But they do not know that the perfectional stage of devotion is the attainment of the perfection of the yoga system. This constant meditation on Krishna by the gopis is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita to be the topmost yoga. Krishna knew very well the psychology of women. When a woman's beloved is away, she thinks of him meditatively, and he is present before her. Krishna wanted to teach through the behavior of the gopis. One who is constantly in trance, like the gopis, surely attains the lotus feet of Krishna. Lord Chaitanya taught people in general the method of vipralambha, which is the method of rendering service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the feeling of separation. The 6 Goswamis also taught worship of Krishna in the feeling of the gopis in separation. The prayers of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam about the Goswamis explain these matters very clearly. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam said that the Goswamis were always absorbed in the ocean of transcendental feelings in the mood of the gopis. When they lived in Vrindavan, they were searching for Krishna, crying, "Where is Krishna? Where are the gopis? Where are you, Srimati Radharani?" They never said, "We have now seen Radha and Krishna, and therefore our mission is fulfilled." Their mission remained always unfulfilled. They never met Radha and Krishna. At the time of the Rasa dance, those gopis who could not join the Rasa Lila with Krishna gave up their bodies simply by thinking of him. Absorption in Krishna consciousness by feeling separation is thus the quickest method for attainment of the lotus feet of Krishna. By the personal statement of Krishna, the gopis were convinced about the strength of feelings of separation. They were actually experiencing the supernatural method of Krishna worship and were much relieved and happy to understand it. They began to speak as follows. "We have heard that King Kamsa, who was always a source of trouble for the Yadu dynasty, has now been killed. This is good news for us. We hope, therefore, that the members of the Yadu dynasty are very happy in the association of Krishna, who can fulfill all the desires of his devotees. My dear Uddhava, kindly let us know whether Krishna sometimes thinks of us while in the midst of highly enlightened society girls in Mathura. We know that the women and girls in Mathura are not village women. They are enlightened and beautiful. Their bashful, smiling glances and other feminine features must be very pleasing to Krishna. We know very well that Krishna is always fond of the behavior of beautiful women. It seems, therefore, that he has been entrapped by the women of Mathura. My dear Uddhava, will you kindly let us know if Krishna sometimes remembers us while he is in the midst of other women?" Another gopi inquired, "Does he remember that night in the midst of the Kumadini flowers and moonlight, when Vrindavan became exceedingly beautiful? Krishna was dancing with us, and the atmosphere was surcharged with the sound of footbells. We exchanged pleasing conversation then. Does he remember that particular night? We remember that night, and we feel separation. Separation from Krishna makes us agitated, as if there were fire in our bodies. He proposed to come back to Vrindavan to extinguish the fire, just as a cloud appears in the sky to extinguish the forest fire by its downpour." Another gopi said, "Krishna has killed his enemy, and he has victoriously achieved the kingdom of Kamsa. Maybe he is married with a king's daughter by this time, and living very happily among his kinsmen and friends. Therefore, why should he come to this village of Vrindavan?" Another gopi said, "Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the husband of the goddess of fortune, and he is self-sufficient. He has no business either with us, the girls in the Vrindavan forest, or with the city girls in Mathura. He is the great Supersoul. He has nothing to do with any of us, either here or there." Another gopi said, "It is an unreasonable hope for us to expect Krishna to come back to Vrindavan. We should try instead to be happy in disappointment. Even Pingala, the great prostitute, said that disappointment is the greatest pleasure. We all know these things, but it is very difficult for us to give up the expectation of Krishna's coming back again. Who can forget a solitary conversation with Krishna, on whose breast the goddess of fortune always remains, in spite of Krishna's not desiring her? My dear Uddhava, Vrindavan is the land of rivers, forests, and cows. Here the vibration of the flute is heard, and Krishna, along with his elder brother Sri Balaram, enjoyed the atmosphere in our company. Thus the environment of Vrindavan is constantly reminding us of Krishna and Balaram. The impression of his footprints is on the land of Vrindavan, which is the residential place of the goddess of fortune. But such signs cannot help us to get Krishna. The Gopis further expressed that Vrindavan was still full of all opulence and good fortune. There was no scarcity or want in Vrindavan as far as material necessities were concerned. But in spite of such opulence, they could not forget Krishna and Balaram. We are constantly remembering various attractive features of beautiful Krishna, his walking, his smiling, and his joking words. We have all become lost by the dealings of Krishna, and it is impossible for us to forget him. We are always praying for him, exclaiming, "Dear Lord, dear husband of the goddess of fortune, dear Lord of Vrindavan and deliverer of the distressed devotees. We are now fallen and merged into an ocean of distress. Please, therefore, come back again to Vrindavan and deliver us from this pitiable condition." Uddhava minutely studied the transcendental abnormal condition of the gopis in their separation from Krishna, and he thought it wise to repeat all the pastimes of Sri Krishna over and over again. Materialistic persons are always in a burning condition on account of the blazing fire of material miseries. The gopis also were burning in a transcendental blazing fire due to separation from Krishna. The blazing fire which was exasperating the gopis, however, is different from the fire of the material world. The gopis constantly want the association of Krishna, whereas the materialistic person wants the advantage of material comforts. It is stated by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that Krishna saved the cowherd boys from the blazing forest fire within a second, while their eyes were closed. Similarly, Uddhava advised the gopis that they could be saved from the fire of separation by closing their eyes and meditating on the activities of Krishna from the very beginning of their association with him. From the outside, the gopis could visualize all the pastimes of Krishna by hearing the descriptions of Uddhava, and from inside they could remember those pastimes. From the instruction of Uddhava, the gopis could understand that Krishna was not separate from them. As they were constantly thinking of Krishna, Krishna was also thinking of them constantly while at Mathura. Uddhava's messages and instructions saved the gopis from immediate death, and the gopis acknowledged the benediction from Uddhava. Uddhava practically acted as the preceptor spiritual master of the gopis, and in return, they worshipped him as they would worship Krishna. It is recommended in authoritative scriptures that the spiritual master should be worshipped on the level of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of his being his very confidential servitor, and is accepted by great authorities that the spiritual master is the external manifestation of Krishna. The gopis were relieved from their transcendental burning condition by realizing that Krishna was with them. Internally, they remembered his association within their hearts, and externally, Uddhava helped them to appreciate Krishna by conclusive instructions. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described in the scriptures as adhokshaja, which indicates that he is beyond the perception of all material senses. Although he is beyond the perception of material senses, he is present in everyone's heart. At the same time, he is present everywhere by his all-pervasive feature of Brahman. All three transcendental features of the Absolute Truth, Bhagwan, the Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, the localized Supersoul, and the all-pervasive Brahman, can be realized simply by studying the condition of the gopis in their meeting with Uddhava, as described by the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It is said by Śrīnivāsācārya that the 6 Goswamis were always merged in thoughts of the activities of the gopis. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has also recommended the gopis' method of worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as super excellent. Śrīla Shukadeva Goswami has also recommended that anyone who hears from the right source about the dealings of the gopis with Krishna and who follows the instructions will be elevated to the topmost position of devotional service and will be able to give up the lust of material enjoyment. All the gopis were solaced by the instruction of Uddhava, and they requested him to stay in Vrindavan for a few days more. Uddhava agreed to their proposal and stayed with them not only for a few days, but for a few months. He always kept them engaged in thinking of the transcendental message of Krishna and his pastimes, and the gopis were feeling as if they were experiencing direct association with Krishna. While Uddhava remained in Vrindavan, the inhabitants enjoyed his association. As they discussed the activities of Krishna, the days passed just like moments. Vrindavan's natural atmosphere, with the presence of the river Jamuna, its nice orchards of trees decorated with various fruits, Govardhan Hill, caves, blooming flowers, all combined to inspire Uddhava to narrate Krishna's pastimes. The inhabitants enjoyed Uddhava's association in the same way as they enjoyed the association of Krishna. Uddhava was attracted by the attitude of the gopis because they were completely attached to Krishna, and Uddhava was inspired by the gopis' anxiety for Krishna. He began to offer them his respectful obeisances and compose songs in praise of their transcendental qualities as follows. Among all the living entities who have accepted the human form of life, the gopis are super excellently successful in their mission. Their thought is thoroughly absorbed in the lotus feet of Krishna. Great sages and saintly persons are also trying to be absorbed in meditation upon the lotus feet of Krishna, who is Mukunda himself, the giver of liberation. But the gopis, having lovingly accepted the Lord, are automatically accustomed to this habit. They do not depend on any yogic practice. The conclusion is that one who has attained the gopis' condition of life does not have to take birth as Lord Brahma, or be born in a Brahmin family, or be initiated as a Brahmin. Sri Uddhava confirmed the statement of Bhagavad Gita spoken by Lord Krishna. One who takes shelter of him for the right purpose, be he a Shudra or lower, will attain the highest goal of life. The gopis have set the standard of devotion for the whole world. By following in the footsteps of the gopis, by constantly thinking of Krishna, one can attain the highest perfectional stage of spiritual life. The gopis were not born of any highly cultured family. They were born of cowherd men, and yet they developed the highest love of Krishna. For self-realization or God-realization, there is no need to take birth in a high family. The only thing needed is ecstatic development of love of God. In achieving perfection in Krishna consciousness, no other qualification is required than to be constantly engaged in the loving service of Krishna. Krishna is the supreme nectar, the reservoir of all pleasure. The effect of taking up Krishna consciousness is just like that of drinking nectar. With or without one's knowledge, it will act. The active principle of Krishna consciousness will manifest itself everywhere. It does not matter how and where one has taken his birth. Krishna will bestow his benediction upon anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness without any doubt. The supreme benediction attained by the gopis, in spite of their being born in the family of cowherd men, was never attained even by the goddess of fortune herself, and certainly not by the denizens of heaven, though their bodily forms are like lotuses. The gopis are so fortunate that during Rasa Leela, Krishna personally embraced them with his arms. Krishna kissed them face to face. Certainly it is not possible for any women in the three worlds to achieve this except the gopis. Uddhava appreciated the exalted position of the gopis and wished to fall down and take the dust of their feet on his head. Yet he did not dare to ask the gopis to offer the dust from their feet. Perhaps they would not be agreeable. He therefore desired to have his head smeared with the dust of the gopis' feet without their knowledge. He desired to become only an insignificant clump of grass or herbs in the land of Vrindavan. The gopis were so much attracted to Krishna that when they heard the vibration of his flute, they instantly left their families, children, honor, and feminine bashfulness, and ran towards the place where Krishna was standing. They did not consider whether they were passing over the road or through the jungles. Imperceptibly, the dust of their feet was bestowed on small grasses and herbs of Vrindavan. Not daring to place the dust of the gopis' feet on his own head, Uddhava aspired to have a future birth in the position of a clump of grass and herbs. He would then be able to have the dust of the gopis' feet. Uddhava appreciated the extraordinary fortune of the gopis, who relieved themselves of all kinds of material contamination by placing on their high, beautiful breasts the lotus feet of Krishna, which are not only worshipped by the goddess of fortune, but by such exalted demigods as Brahma and Lord Shiva, and which are meditated on by great yogis within their hearts. Thus, Uddhava desired to be able to constantly pray to be honored by the dust of the Gopis' lotus feet. The Gopis' chanting of the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna has become celebrated all over the three worlds. After living in Vrindavan for some days, Uddhava desired to go back to Krishna, and he begged permission to leave from Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda. He had a farewell meeting with the Gopis, and taking permission of them also, he mounted his chariot to start from Mathura. When Uddhava was about to leave, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, headed by Maharaj Nanda and Yasoda, came to bid him goodbye and presented him with various kinds of valuable goods secured in Vrindavan. They expressed their feelings with tears in their eyes due to intense attachment for Krishna. All of them desired benediction from Uddhava. They desired always to remember the glorious activities of Krishna and wanted their minds to be always fixed upon his lotus feet, their words always engaged in glorifying Krishna, and their bodies always engaged in bowing down and constantly remembering him. This prayer of the inhabitants of Vrindavan is the super excellent type of self-realization. The method is very simple: to fix the mind always on the lotus feet of Krishna, to talk always of Krishna without passing on to any other subject matter, and to engage the body in Krishna's service constantly. Specifically in this human form of life, one should engage his life, his resources, words, and intelligence for the service of the Lord. Such kinds of activities only can elevate a human being to the highest level of perfection. This is the verdict of all authorities. The inhabitants of Vrindavan said, "By the will of the Supreme Authority, and according to the results of our own work, we may take our birth anywhere. It doesn't matter where we are born, but our only prayer is that we may be simply engaged in Krishna consciousness." A pure devotee of Lord Krishna never desires to be promoted to the heavenly planets or even to Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan, because he has no desire for his own personal satisfaction. A pure devotee regards both heaven and hell to be on an equal level. Without Krishna, heaven is hell, and with Krishna, hell is heaven. When Uddhava had sufficiently honored the worship of the pure devotees of Vrindavan, he returned to Mathura and to his master, Krishna. After offering respects by bowing down before Lord Krishna and Balaram, he began to describe the wonderful devotional life of the inhabitants of Vrindavan. He presented all the gifts given by the inhabitants of Vrindavan to Vyāsadeva, the father of Krishna, and Ugrasen, the grandfather of Krishna. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 46th chapter of Krishna, delivery of the message of Krishna to the Gopis.
Thank you for listening. For more, click here.